Everybody, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in and for taking part of your Saturday for this. We've got an absolutely great opportunity with Mr. David Spiro, who is the head grant director for Pasadena Education Foundation, who has very willingly given his time to give us this training for PTAs. And this is something that I don't think anybody else is going to be doing, and it's absolutely fabulous that he's willing to do this for us. So in that case, I will say, take it away, David. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I had some ground rules, but I'm going to throw them out the window because there are not a lot of people here. I was going to say no questions till the end, but because there's only a handful of people, feel free to pipe up and ask questions, just anywhere in the presentation if there's something you don't understand, or if you have a more detailed question or want some point of clarification. This is being recorded, and the PowerPoint that's part of this presentation, Steve will share that with everybody when the recording is available too. So don't have to worry about that. Let's go. Jeff, next slide. So before I even get to the good stuff about how to write a successful grant proposal, I'm going to talk about quite a bit about the process leading up to this. And all this stuff is going to seem annoying, but you really need to do all of this before you even think about applying for a grant. And I say this because in 30 years of fundraising, I've seen enough disasters, big and small, because people, including myself, have not followed all these steps, and something has gone wrong after the money has been received, which is not what you want to happen. So just let's go through this. The first thing is to understand what a PTA is allowed to do and what it's not allowed to do. I received from another PTA president the 54-page document from the California PTA about guidelines and finances and fundraising and what you're allowed to do and whether you can employ people or hire contractors. That is the first thing that everyone must be familiar with and understand before you go ahead. So I strongly suggest that you review that document. And Steve, you've sent it I saw you send it to people before, but it's a good idea to send it to them again. That's the first place to start. There are limitations. I think everybody knows that you are not forbidden from hiring people, but you are strongly discouraged from hiring people. So these are the sorts of things that you need to know before you go ahead to plan a project. The second thing is you really need to consult everyone who will be involved in your project, ask for their input and get their agreement. Your principal is an obvious person, but if you're going to do a project with teachers, you want to get the teachers buy-in too, other parents, potentially other departments within the district. For instance, if you're going to write a grant to buy technology for your school, you need to talk to the IT department, because if you don't, they're not going to service the equipment in future years when it starts to break. And you're going to be on the hook for the cost of that. If you do talk to IT and get their approval for the purchase of these sort of technology, computers, or whatever it is, then they will service it. That's the sort of thing that you don't want to find out a year from now. You also just don't want to find yourself in a situation where there's an important person at your school who doesn't agree with what you're doing and gets in the way. So you want to take care of that all before you've even thought about applying for a grant.
I have a question.
Pardon?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Did you want me to use the raise hand feature or?
No, because I can't see it.
Oh, you
Go
can't
ahead
see.
and just
Oh, okay.
interrupt.
Okay, I just wanted to know what you meant by the IT department. Are you talking about PUSD, or do you mean?
So that's
because we don't have an IT department, we have a computer teacher.
No, I mean at the district level.
The district IT,
At the
okay.
district level. So the Information Technology Services,
Got it.
ITS they're called, and you would go to the district website and contact somebody there and say what you're planning to do, what you're planning to buy, and it makes sure that the district will service the equipment. Okay?
Got it.
Got it. We tell
Thank you.
teachers to do that all the time. Okay. The next bullet point is about finding out if there are internal resources. And what I mean is, does PEF already have money for this or something like it? Or does the district already have money for something like this? So PEF funds field trips throughout the year. So if a teacher wants to go on a field trip and comes to you, say, well, have you asked PEF for that money? Each school has an allotment of funds on an annual basis for field trips. And we give that out until it's gone. And often it's not used in its entirety. So find out about that. We also give teacher grants and school-wide grants annually in the fall. And teachers and principals can apply for that directly. And that money is exclusively for PUSD. So you're not competing with other school districts or organizations for this money. So again, that's why you want to consult with everybody on a project. And sometimes teachers don't know about the the PEF teacher grants. It's another way to get the word out. We post the guidelines in August, and the applications are generally due in October.
Are these?
Yes?
I'm sorry. Are these
Go ahead.
teachers' grants like used? What do they use for the classroom, or the teachers' extra pay?
No. It's for projects, classroom projects
Okay.
that to improve student outcomes.
Classroom projects. Okay.
I didn't know about the field trips because we've been funding or trying to fund field trips when.
Well, see, yeah, and a lot of teachers don't know about it either. We've discovered that when we go out and talk about the grants. Somehow that word has not gone out. So always tell teachers to ask PEF first.
Is that something that the principal is? You said to ask PEF and our own school? Is that something that the principal
No,
has?
so each school is allotted a certain amount based on your population, the number of kids in your school, at the beginning of the year from the funds we've received. And the teachers just apply for them.
Okay.
It's an ongoing thing. It's on our website. It says field trips. So the thing to do is to spread the word about that.
Oh yeah.
Especially if a teacher comes to you and says, "Will you fund a field trip?" Say, "Have you already asked PEF to fund it?"
Okay.
I'm gonna call as soon as this is over.
See, this has already been useful.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's go. Next slide. Okay. It's important to know all of your actual expenses and set attainable fundraising goals. Often there are hidden costs in a project, and I'll tell you about, here, I'll give you my first nightmare. It wasn't mine, I heard about it. There was a PTA, I believe, in LAUSD that applied for a very large grant to do some greening of their school, to tear out the asphalt and put in gardens and green space and just make the school just generally look better and be environmentally more sound. So they assumed that they could just bring a contractor in to do this work. Well, you can't. You cannot just bring a contractor into a school building. They said, and because they were an LAUSD, is so enormous. That whole thing the whole project went under the radar until the union found out. And they had not budgeted for union wages. And so they had this very large grant and suddenly found themselves several $100,000 short of being able to do the project. They were able to raise the additional money and they did it, but you don't ever want to be in that situation. So that's another reason to consult with all the PUSD departments that might have some involvement. So if you're going to start doing any kind of construction or renovation or improvements to a school campus, you better start with PUSD facilities and get their buy-in and approval, and get them to help you figure out what it would really cost.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
This again, at the beginning of the slide, it mentioned, or you mentioned, that we're not allowed to hire somebody.
Right. Well, this PTA, if it was a PTA, I'm hearing this, I got this story secondhand. So, but it still illustrates the point. I think they figured they could hire a contractor because they weren't hiring labor, and the contractor was hiring the labor. That doesn't absolve anybody of needing to follow labor law and adhering to union rules that govern what happens at a school.
So we have to, okay. What if my example, because I went through some of the, okay, so there's a grant that I saw that supported physical education.
Mm-hmm.
So what if our school has an after-school program that's kind of in and around the school, very involved? What if I apply for something that involves hiring them to do the job of fulfilling the physical education portion that we don't currently have?
You would need to deposit that money with the district, or with the district, to hire that person, because you don't want to be employing people. That opens a whole can of worms. Is that correct, Steve? You want to, and Jeff? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so I have to do it.
You could raise that money, but you'd have to deposit it with the district.
In fact, we just did this at Blair, where we bought swim blocks on a Tournament of Roses grant. And the way that we did it was the money was granted to the district, approved by the school board, and facilities cut the agreement with the company that came and poured out for the parts for the swim blocks to be mounted and all that. So all that liability was on the district, and none of it was on us as individuals on the PTA board or as the PTA.
Oh, it's kind of like washing. Okay.
Yes. And it was a slower process than we thought it should be, but they were still helpful. Facilities were helpful. Nadia and facilities is wonderful. So that they weren't an impediment to us. It was just, we didn't understand at the very beginning what we were getting into. And so it's a good, this is a good.
Yes.
So so let's say there's a specific grant for specific purpose that I'm applying for. I would apply for it on behalf of the school then, or for the district?
No,
you have to go to the district.
You are the nonprofit organization, the 501c3, eligible to apply for a grant. Generally, a foundation grant, foundations only give to 501c3s, nonprofit organizations. So your school technically isn't, and neither is the district is, but let's, for all intents and purposes, say the district is not a 501c3. You need to apply, but you can also, to avoid the liability issues, you can deposit that money with the district. Isn't that correct, Steve?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's how we did it. And since this was a capital improvement project where we were actually having a construction crew, even though it was a small one, come on campus, we did do it through facilities, with facilities doing the purchase orders. The purchase orders were approved by the school board. We wrote the money over to PUSD. PUSD handled all of the invoicing and payments, and then they gave us the proof that it had been spent the way the grant was supposed to be spent back, so that we could turn that back over to the Tournament of Roses and turn the grant up.
So that even that the accounting, the accounting, how it was spent, was kept and managed by the PUSD, the district.
Yes, but it was a grant for the Blair PTA. The Blair PTA wrote it. We wrote it under our EIN number and applied for it on ours. They just executed the grant for us.
Right. Even PEF avoids hiring people directly if we can. So we hire people directly for our summer program, And they're all employees. So we've switched from making them independent contractors to employees because of the strictness of the state's labor laws. So when we get a grant, say, to hire an artist in residence for a school, we take that money, but then we transfer it to the district, so the district hires that person. We avoid, even PEF avoids hiring people as much as possible. So that tells you how many pitfalls there are in, and we have a large staff to manage this, and we still don't do it because we can't, you know, there's just too many dangers. So
the
if you want to
district
hire
is
someone,
nonprofit.
right, if you want to hire someone, apply for the grant as the PTA, as a nonprofit. You are, the foundation, the grantor, everyone will understand if you transfer that money to the district to do the hiring or to pay the contract.
It's a common process. They were
Yes.
very familiar with it, even though we were not at the time. But they were very familiar with how it all went through and walked us all through it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. The next point is carefully read foundation and corporation guidelines and priorities, note deadlines, proposal formats, submission requirements, and the typical dollar range of their grants. Most of this information is generally on their websites. Make sure your proposal is aligned with these. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And, oh, and one of the things to understand is, is their grant making local, regional, is it national? And to understand how competitive these grants are. So if there's a national foundation and it's only making 5 grants throughout the entire country, this is going to be super competitive, and you may want to avoid that. I avoid it as much as possible, unless I think I have a project that's so super and so unique that maybe we'd be able to, you know, compete with people from New York to Florida to Arkansas. But generally, it's not a good idea. Look for foundations that support organizations locally and regionally. They are your best bet. Also, don't submit requests to grant makers who don't accept unsolicited proposals. That is actually the majority of foundations. The majority of foundations are small family-run foundations, and they decide who they give their money to. They don't read applications. They don't take phone calls. They generally don't have a website. But that is something to be aware of. And I'll talk more about family foundations in a few minutes. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next slide, Jeff. Okay, once you've done all that, then you need to let me know what it is you're planning to do so that there's no conflict with any grant proposal that I'm preparing or I'm even thinking about preparing. And here's just a list of things I need to know. If you are planning to submit a whole bunch of grants or looking at a whole bunch of proposals, Linus from, I'll get to you in a second, Allison. Linus from Field sent me his list, and I looked at it. You can put this in a spreadsheet format, and I'll just return it to you with comments. Yes, Allison, you had a question.
Hi, so since La Pintoresca is closed, are you able to give us access to the foundation directory online?
For which part of it? You mean the...
To do the research to see specific grants that perhaps PTA could apply for. I know that website was very helpful in filtering out information.
Okay, and I do have a subscription to it. Oops, Allison, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Okay.
So PF has a subscription to the foundation directory online. I don't want to share my login and password, but perhaps if you just contact me, we'll figure out how to do it.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Contact me directly, great. Okay, I think this is clear. Please do check with me first though, because the worst thing that can happen is that you submit a proposal at the same time PEF has submitted a proposal and they're going to think we're crazy to the same foundation. Sometimes it might be good also for PTAs who are both looking to do the same sort of thing to go in together, although that can get tricky. But if you contact me, if I know what everyone is planning to do, I can sometimes connect you. So if two PTAs are looking to do an after-school athletic program or PE program, it might be better for both of you to go in together, or for PEF to do the request on your behalf. So this is a good way for me to keep on top of what's going on and to help you. All right, let's go. We're almost there to how to write a grant. To the next slide. Okay, do it. Once you have the okay from me, go ahead and start writing. My suggestion is always assign only 1 or 2 people to write the proposal. Grant writing committees by committee is no good. And always have a third person review what you've written for accuracy, spelling, grammar. We are actually writing for schools, so it's a good idea to spell things correctly and use proper grammar, and for clarity and completeness. Every grant I write, I try to have somebody else review before we submit, because you see what you think you've written, and other people catch what you missed. So one next slide, please, Jeff. Okay. This is important, and that's why I have this always keep in mind. So the first thing is, foundations and all grant-making organizations receive many more requests than they're able to fund. So they're not looking for a reason to fund you. Most, they have more good proposals than they're able to support. So they're looking for a reason to reject your proposal. The most common thing is there's a misalignment between their guidelines and interests and what you've asked for. So I recommend never stretching, like, oh, well, this seems to fit. If it only seems to fit, it doesn't fit. If they say, okay, we fund education, and we focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And you say, well, let's see, physical education, well, there's biology in that, and that's science. No, it isn't. They're going to turn you down. The other reason to being turned down often is you're not really in their geographic area. I was just looking at a big corporate foundation that says, we give priority to proposals from San Francisco and Florida, New York. What that really means is, so you might see that and say, well, they give priority, maybe they'll consider something from the LA region. What they really should say is, this is exclusively where we fund. So you kind of have to read between the lines, when they say our priority is, that means really, this is exclusively what we do. So don't send us something from a different geographic area or that's sort of meets our guidelines. Make sure it's a very good fit, or otherwise just don't bother. The other thing is to remember that single foundations rarely fund the whole budget of a project unless it's small. And by small, I mean 5,000 or less. And they want to see that you already have some money before they'll commit. It's a tricky business. So if you're able to get donations from individuals and members, and at least show that a portion of your budget is already raised, they'll be much more likely to want to support you. It's a very annoying fact of fundraising, but nobody wants to be the first. So if you can show there's funds committed, you'll be in a much stronger position. Okay, here's the thing about family foundations. Use your connections in the school and reach out to parents. So here's another one of my stories. A couple of months ago, we received a fairly substantial check from a foundation I'd never heard of. that was designated to one elementary school's annual fund. And I went, who are these people? And within 15 minutes, I had figured out that a parent at that school was the great-grandson of one of the Warner brothers. You never know who, this person, I also looked up the person's address, lives in a modest house up here in Altadena. But because of who he was related to and a foundation that was established about 70 years ago, he was able to get a really nice gift for the school where his children attend. And we do get a number of these from people, people who are parents and whose families have foundations. So reach out, ask people in the school, do you know anyone with a family foundation? These are the ones that typically don't take unsolicited grant applications. And ask, and if they say yes, ask for their advice or help or advocacy. Or sometimes if you just put the word out that you are raising funds, these people who sort of hide in the woodwork can just go to their parents or brothers. Generally, the family sits on the boards of these foundations. It's all brothers and sisters and cousins and mothers and fathers, and ask them to recommend a gift to your PTA. It's more common than you think. And now the last one, and I'm going to go, this one may seem odd, and why is this here? A nonprofit charitable organization has no needs, none. It exists to address the needs of the community it serves. So why is this here? 2 reasons. It makes asking for money a lot easier. Nobody likes asking for money. But when you realize you are not asking for yourself or even for your organization, but on behalf of people that your organization serves, it kind of makes an unpleasant task really actually fulfilling. And if you keep this in mind while you're writing your proposal, you will write a much more compelling grant application. So I'm going to tell you a story of how I know this. 30 years ago, I was the brand new development director of the Armory Center for the Arts, which had just opened. And I had never done this before. So I really didn't know what I was doing. And my boss sent me to a workshop. And the workshop leader went around the room and said, okay, what do you need? And we had just opened a few weeks before. And we had done this whole series of public programs, talks and lectures and discussions. And there were no chairs in the building. So I remember it was very much at the top of my mind going back and forth across Raymond Avenue to the senior center on a daily basis to drag chairs over so there would be chairs in the room when we gave a lecture, when there was a lecture. So when she said to me, what do you need? I said, we need chairs. So she went around the room and kept doing that. And then she came back to me and zeroed in on me. And she said to me, you don't need chairs. The public needs a place to sit when they come to your center to participate in programs. And that was a revelation to me. And it was a really embarrassing revelation to me. That has stuck in my mind forever. So remember that. You have no needs whatsoever. You are asking for funds to fulfill needs in the community that you serve. Make sense?
Yes.
Good. All right. Finally, we get to grant writing. Next slide, please, Jen. All right, the elements of a proposal. If there's no application form and no specific questions to answer, I'm giving you the following information that I think should always be included. And 2 to 4 single-space pages is generally the ideal length of a proposal. You can go longer, you can go shorter, but typically that's the amount of space you need to really describe your project in its entirety and make a compelling proposal. So usually start with a summary, and I've given you a little template to use. And then, next slide, please, Jeff. The elements, the W's, the who's, what's, when's, where's, and the why's. And this is really what you must always include. So start with who you are. Talk about when you were established, how many members you have, your affiliation with the California PTA, which establishes you as a nonprofit, and maybe a brief list of your recent accomplishments. The purpose of this is to demonstrate your capacity to carry out the project you are asking for support. This is important. This is the first thing the foundation is going to know. Are you capable of doing what you're proposing? And your past activities prove that, okay? Then what are you planning to do and what is the goal of your project? So when I say the goal is your big idea, it could be to improve academic achievement in your school, or for instance, to make your campus greener, to provide enrichment after school, to maybe improve school climate. Any one of those, but make sure your goal is clearly stated. Who will benefit and how? How many people is the project going to serve? And break it up into students, teachers, staff, parents, caregivers in detail. Why are you doing this? What are the specific needs your project addresses? And this comes back to you exist to serve the needs, to address needs in your community. So there's a number of ways you can demonstrate need. You can talk about the student demographics in your school, the English learners, students with disabilities, if that's the sort of thing you're addressing. You can talk about test scores, you can talk about health, you can talk about school climate. There's a number of resources where you can find out all sorts of statistics about your school. Or you can just talk about the observed need. You know what your school needs. Dual language, more technology, more books, whatever it is that the people in your parents, your teachers, your principals have told you that the school is lacking, and how this will help achieve your goal. When, time of year, as well as frequency. So if you're proposing an after-school program, will it meet 2 times a week, 3 times a week? For how many hours? These little details are important because they paint the full picture. And where is this going to take place? If it's all on campus, that's great. If you're going to go on some field trips, make sure that you list specifically where people are going to go. And if there are collaborating organizations, but we're going to come to that in a minute. Any questions so far? Details are important. So describe your project in as much detail as you can.
I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
So I'm a professor at Pierce College, and we have a lot of problems with grants because every time we get a grant, we have some amazing things. Maybe it's a human being or some great resource or anti-plagiarism software. And then the following year we get the usual, well, the grant ran out, so now we say goodbye to this person, we say goodbye to the anti-plagiarism software. Everything just disappears. And is there any sustainable, are there any sustainable grants that you can apply and they last, or you can turn them into, what's that thing called where you put money in an account and you just use the interest, or I don't know, that's probably crazy.
An endowment, or yes.
Endowment, I don't know. I'm always thinking of like, I always feel sad when we get a grant because I know it's going away.
It's an excellent question, and very often for major grants that I'm applying for PF, we have to address the question, the issue of sustainability. they ask it specifically, how are you going to be able to sustain this project once our funding runs out? That's a big challenge. And you're right.
It's always no for us, because we're barely hanging on most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, typically what you need to do is, once you, I know this is not the answer you want to hear, you're going to have to look for multiple sources of funding and really start looking for those sources of funding as soon as you started the project, so that you can get to next year. One of the important things you need to do is to document what you're doing once you've received the grant and started the program. And the more you can document its benefit, whether through evaluation or any of that, then you have even a stronger case when you start going to other funders for the same program. But yeah, it's a big challenge. We have that same challenge at PEF, and I have to say that I have written some sustainability plans that were, basically, well, we hope we can do this. So that's my best answer. The best thing to do is to evaluate and get solid results and data, and also to take pictures and videos to make your next proposal more compelling. Okay? All right. Next slide, Jen. All right. Elements of the proposal continued. Collaboration. Articulate how you're working with your principal, the administrators in the district, any community partners. Again, this goes back to your planning process. Foundations will often want to know that you have the buy-in of all the partners. Sometimes it's even a good idea, if you're involving people from outside of the district, to have a letter of agreement or a letter of commitment with your proposal. This shows the foundation you've done your homework. And now to evaluation. How will you know if your project is successful? So what tools and measurements will you use to evaluate it, and who is going to prepare the report? And how will you use this data to improve your project in the future? This is the hardest thing about grant writing, is figuring these things out. So I'm going to give you some suggestions. If you're doing a program that's going to take place in a classroom, the easiest thing to do is to design a very simple pre-program and post-program survey. Just ask 4 or 5 questions, for instance, of the teacher. So before the program started, your students in your class, did they struggle with math? What were their challenges? And then after the program is done, you ask the same questions again. And that way you're able to measure. You can say, oh, this had a definite impact on student achievement, or on student health, or on their social emotional, that kids feel more supported in school because of your project, or they're just happier to be in school. There's kind of infinite ways to do this, but to me that is the easiest way to survey people before the program started to see where they were, and then when the program is over, to survey them again and see where they've come. It's a lot of work, but it goes back to that sustainability issue. If you can demonstrate that your program has an impact in numbers and in feedback from the participants, you'll be able to sustain the program better. This is a really tricky one. I wasn't even going to include it, but I looked in the PTA 54-page guidelines, and they actually included it. They said you really should evaluate your project. It is the most challenging thing. So I will stop now and see if anyone has any questions about it.
No, thank you for doing that, because we didn't think about that.
Okay, yeah, really, because you're going to want to know yourselves, well, was this a worthwhile thing to do? And if you don't evaluate it,
Yeah.
you'll have a vague feeling. Oh, okay, well, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. Do we know? You'll want to know. Yes,
Can
go.
I ask another question? You said for the collaboration, we
Yeah,
will show that we've done our homework if we've touched base with the principal, appropriate administrators in the district, and community partners. So we know who our principal is, but
right.
what's the example of like district administrators?
Well, that's so, okay, so that goes back to, for instance, facilities. So if you're asking for something like the Blair swim blocks is a perfect
Yeah.
example,
Okay.
who's going to install them? Right? Or a shade structure or something like that. Somebody has to install it. So a savvy foundation officer is going to say, they seem to have left a part out. There's no money for installation or labor in their budget. Did they forget that they needed to do that? That's what I mean by that. Or again, back to the technology issue, if you're buying computers, just say, okay, we have consulted with the district's IT department, and they have approved and agreed to service these computers in the future. And that's all you need to say.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Budget. How much will the project cost? How much are you requesting? It's important to know the typical grant range of a foundation. So if they typically grant between 5,000 and 25,000, since PTAs are generally a small organization, it's good to go in towards the low middle end of that. Certainly never ask for more than the typical maximum grant the foundation gives, because it'll just be rejected out of hand. Let's see, and it's a good idea to attach a very detailed line item budget that includes other sources of income, both committed and pending. So if you ask the Wells Fargo Foundation for money, they're going to want to know who else you're asking for money. So they're going to want to see, okay, oh, well, you've listed the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation or the Pasadena Community Foundation. Both of them you should not ask, sorry. But they want to know who else you're asking for money and how much you're asking from each. And obviously your income, your projected income should match your expenses.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I say to Wells Fargo, yes, I'm asking for 5,000 from you and 5,000 from this other fictional foundation, what if they go, oh, great, okay, well, here's your 5,000, and then I don't get the other 5,000 from that other place?
Well, that's why you always ask for much more money than you really need. So recently I sent a grant application, 4 similar grant applications for what was really not an expensive project. It's only going to cost the district about $15,000 to do this specialized health program. 2 of them have already been rejected. So, you know, I sent out proposals for more than $30,000 for a $15,000 project, just to cover my bases. And it's a good thing I did, because 2 of them have already been turned down.
But I thought you said it has to be a very detailed and specific budget.
Yes, yes.
So
well, I see what you mean.
Where does extra padding come from?
Yeah, there's padding. You're asking, you need to be asking for more from more sources, and for more money than your budget. But you don't need to tell people that.
You just make up.
It's a little bit of a game. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I make up an expense of some kind, or
no. Your budget should be exactly what you anticipate spending. But okay, so say your budget's $25,000, and you're asking Wells Fargo for $5,000. As I said earlier, you're going to want to have some money in hand, so you can say you've already raised $5,000 from individuals. And then you can say you're asking, so, okay, so there's 10,000. You need another 15. You can say you're asking XYZ Foundation for 10 and 123 Foundation for, okay, another 5, when in reality, you've asked them each for 20. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, they don't talk to each other. They won't know.
Very rarely, very rarely. Not on that level of detail.
Okay.
Now, if you're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, yeah, they start to talk to each other. But on this level, no, they don't. Make sense?
Yes.
It's a little bit of a dance, but it's an important dance. Okay. Are we ready to go on?
Do we need to ask these? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What I mean is, do we need to be able to provide this information? Who else we're asking money for every application?
Generally, everyone wants to know.
Oh, so they will ask. Do we voluntarily provide that, or is that on the questionnaire?
They are often ask you for it specifically, but if they don't, you should provide it. They want to know.
Okay.
They do want to know.
Okay. I've never seen it before, but okay.
I do it every time. Every budget I send includes a list of the people who have committed to funding, who we have already asked, or even who we're thinking of asking. So I'll write, Wells Fargo Foundation has committed to this amount of money. And then the XYZ Foundation, we have a $25,000 proposal pending. And then I'll say the ABC Foundation, we will shortly submit a proposal for another 25,000.
Okay, got it. We'll submit.
I always do that, and I think it's best practice.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Should we go on?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and this gets back to what you should include with your proposal. Very often, foundations will tell you exactly what it is they want, and you just follow those guidelines. But if they don't, my suggestion for including material with your application or proposal is to keep it at a minimum. So since you're a PTA, it's a good thing to confirm your nonprofit status. I guess you use, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, you include the California PTA?
No,
How do you
each
do that?
unit has its own EIN number.
Oh, you do?
So-
Okay. Each PTA has its own nonprofit number. Good. That means you generally have a letter from the IRS confirming that, correct? Okay. That you should include that. The budget, as we discussed. I think letters of support and commitment are a very powerful tool to include. So if there are teachers who have been affected by what you've done, or students or parents who also have been impacted by the programs you've done in the past, or are very much in favor of what you're proposing, someone else telling the foundation that what you want to do is important, someone from your own community saying, this is important and you should support it, is a powerful, powerful tool. And I recommend getting those. No more than 1 or 2 or 3, otherwise it just gets to be overkill. But this is also really good practice because it's somebody else verifying not only your capacity, but that your idea is good. Okay, and then no more than 1 or 2 items that can convey important details about your proposal. So this can be an article about the problem, about, in general in schools, about the lack of how the lack of physical education can affect students. It's not necessarily, these things are not necessary, but they sometimes help, again, show that, that you're on the right track with your approach. Okay, I'm just about to get to the resources page of this presentation. So this is a good time to ask any more questions if you'd like.
I have to leave in a few minutes, but
Okay.
can you make this PowerPoint available?
Yes, we're going to. It's going to come from Steve, right?
Yes, that's correct. We'll make this available and the video of the presentation available too.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, and we're almost done, and it's almost 3 o'clock. So we'll get to the last slide, which is resources. Okay. There's a wealth of information in every foundation's tax return, and all their tax returns are public record. You can go through every page of them. And I've given you a couple of websites where you can find them. What they have in them that's valuable is the list of grants they made in that tax year. They list who they gave them to and how much. And that sometimes is more telling than their guidelines, because you can see specifically what it is they're supporting and who and for how much. So that really gives you an idea of the range of their grants. And sometimes it tells you, okay, they say they support organizations in the greater Los Angeles region, and you look at the list of their grantees and they're all in Long Beach. And you go, aha, okay, it's very unlikely that they're going to make a grant in Pasadena if all their grants are in Long Beach. And you can basically eliminate them from your list. Now, these 990s tend to be very long, anywhere from a dozen to 50 or 100 pages. So it is a long slog to look through them, but it is very valuable information. It's probably the most detailed information you can find out about them. And then, as Allison mentioned, there are sophisticated online search engines like the Foundation Directory, Foundation Directory Online, which we have a subscription to. Allison, did you say that the libraries have a subscription to these also? Could you?
So Jaylene Mosley,
Yeah.
she gave the computers and the subscription to La Pineresca, so that's where I used to go.
Oh, okay.
And of course, it's closed, so
Oh,
there's
right.
no accessibility now.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting, because if you know, but you don't have the passwords.
No, you can go in there. There's a
Yeah.
there's a separate room, and when you tell them that this is what you came here for, there's a couple of rooms in there. No, one room that has about, I think, 3 or 4 computers, and their whole focus is to do the grant research using the Foundation Foundation Directory.
Okay.
The library.
It's closed. Can't.
Well, they may
Right,
have an
so,
online
all right.
version, right?
No,
Yeah,
because it's on those computers. It was on those computers.
Oh,
They don't.
Oh,
give
I
you-
see.
They don't give you the private access. You have to physically go there.
Gotcha. That's what I was wondering about. So we have a single user subscription, which is why I'm not willing to generally share our login and password. But if you contact me, I will either assign someone in our office to do the research for you, or I can share my login and password with you individually.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are also a whole bunch of other like things you can, newsletters, and if you just go online and type in grants for PTAs, you'll see all sorts of resources. These are good, but the problem with them is that they don't really vet the foundations very carefully, so that you will get lists of foundations that, for instance, only fund in Illinois, which is no use to us. Or they'll give you huge foundations, like, for instance, they'll include the Hewlett Foundation. Well, the Hewlett Foundation gives enormous grants for huge projects that affect the whole school district. They're not going to entertain a small proposal from a PTA. So you get for every 10 foundations they list, maybe one of them is useful to you. So that's, again, a lot of work. But often they do have good small sources of funding. So again, it's time and effort to go through them, but can be worthwhile. All right, it's exactly 3 o'clock. Are there any more questions?
I'll think of some more to email you.
That's fine. I'm happy to entertain them.
I think this is going to be really.
And please do send me foundations and corporations that you are thinking of applying for, and I can also advise you whether I think that's a good prospect or not. Oh, hi, Felita. And I will review and tell you whether there's a conflict with anything PF or PUSD is doing as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Wonderful.
I think we're going to need some help in the near future, post-pandemic. So this can be very useful. Thank you.
Yes, we're all going to need help. And,
Yes,
and just to be, everyone to be aware, it's going to be very competitive and more difficult to raise money in the next year or over the next couple of years than it has been over the past few years. The good thing, the strange and good thing is that the stock market has not fallen, particularly, you know, it hasn't taken the hit that most of us expected us to. When the stock market takes a hit, foundation giving drops because they are all invested in the stock market.
Right.
So
Rich people are doing great and everybody else is homeless. Yay.
yeah, well, well,
Woohoo.
foundations are not supposed to put their money in high risk funds.
Yeah.
But in 2008, in the Great Recession, we discovered that most of them did. So I hope they learned their lessons and that their investments are not risky, and this will not diminish their ability to give, but it's entirely possible that it will. So we'll see. At some point, the stock market will start reflecting reality. So, and that's gonna be difficult for all of us. So on that, on that downer note.
Yeah, I'm afraid to ask the parents for money. I mean, I was just elected president for next year. I'm like, I don't even know what this is going to be like because
well, again,
they lost jobs and they're losing their homes and.
But not everybody is. So
No.
There's a way of doing of asking for money, saying we understand that people are undergoing hardship, and if you are unable to donate, we understand. But if you are able to donate, please do.